There is an attendance list circulating. Could everyone make sure that you sign the list before you go? If you have a mobile phone, could actually do put it onto silent mode or switch it off for the duration of the hearing. At this point, can I just say Mr. Wren has a procedural matter that she'd just like to query with the council.
It's a housekeeping matter, really. I know you weren't present for the SC1 hearings when we looked at all the villages, Mr. Edwards. But I had noticed that in the council statement they made reference to the Court of Appeal judgment in Richborough Estates and so on. And I offered them the opportunity to update that and made it clear that it was just an opportunity for a factual update. And I was asked by one of the participants if they could have an opportunity to comment on whatever the council said. So I said yes, I would allow a week for that. In the event, we've had one response from Castlefield International. I don't know whether you've had an opportunity to see that. I'm just raising it because they've gone rather beyond commenting on what the council said and have gone into the implications of what they feel the Richborough judgment means for their site of Fulham. They have a live planning application on that site, as I understand it, which of course is nothing to do with the examination process. No doubt what is said in here will be a topic for argument or discussion through the development management process, but I'm not persuaded that it's particularly relevant for the examination. But in fairness, I should give you the opportunity to respond if you wish to do so. My inclination is just to file this rather than start a protracted chain of correspondence, but let me know when you've had a chance to have a look at it, whether you feel that you must respond at this stage.
Yes, I'm a little undecided on that at the moment, but I'll certainly make points of looking at it over the next few days and we can revert to you through the programme officer by the end of the week or early next week.
That would be fine, thank you.
Okay, does everyone have access to the matters and issues agenda for today? In accordance with the published hearing programme, today we will be considering the issues related to matter 11, which is joint omission sites. I will aim to have a short break mid-morning, and I will now ask those who are participating in the discussion to briefly introduce themselves.
Good morning, sir. I'm Neil King, Queen's Counsel. I have with me John Adams of Deloitte, Mike Axon of Vectos, and Richard Burton of Terence O'Rourke, in that order along this table. And I'm hoping, with your permission, to ask them to say a few words and to participate in the discussion. There are others sitting behind me who I can introduce if you wish, but they're not going to be speaking. Thank you very much.
So, I've done as everybody's QC.
We all know that.
Caroline Hunt, Policy Manager of South Cambs District Council. I have with me David Roberts, District Planning Policy Officer, Charles Crawford from LPA Design, and behind us comes the table as may be necessary, Jonathan Dixon from the Planning Policy team, Stephen Miles from the City Council, Andrew Winter from our Local Community team, South Cambridgeshire, and Louis Mason from the Highway Authority, just as may be necessary for you today.
Yeah, I think we're going to need to speak up because we don't have any microphones. There's a sort of noise from the aircon as well, which you're having to compete with. I don't suppose we can do anything about that, can we? No, because we'll probably expire.
Fire if we switch it off.
Yes. So So, yeah, we'll just have to try and remember to speak up.
If participants wish to contribute to the discussion at a particular point, if you upend your nameplate, that will help them Before we turn to the matters and issues, Mr. King, I understand that we have this request for you to submit further information. Could you just explain to us why we need that?
That thing matters have rather moved on since you last were updated with what was going on. Well, very briefly, the council included in its submission document for this hearing session a letter that Mr. Stephen Kelly had written to the planning applicants in relation to the two planning applications that had been made by my clients. One in relation to the objection site, essentially, and one in relation to the Abbey Stadium in Cambridge. And it raised a number of issues about the application and concerns that the council had with it. We felt that was new material that shouldn't have been submitted and really wasn't necessary for you to have in order to hear and as it were, determine this objection. But we felt that if you were going to accept it, we ought to be able to have the opportunity to submit the response that Deloitte, on behalf of my clients, had prepared and sent to the planning authority, I think in February, wasn't it? 23rd of February, I think, or something anyway, along with some of the appendices that accompanied that document. And so I was going to ask you this morning either to rule that the council should not submit that document, but if they did, that we should be allowed to submit the additional material. However, Mr. Edwards and I have had a word this morning, and Mr. Edwards, no doubt, will speak to the council in a moment, because I understand that he's kindly told me that the council, although it doesn't feel it can withdraw the document because it's already in the public domain, that is in the context of this examination, and obviously there are difficulties with that, which I recognise, that the council are going to say that they don't wish to rely on that document in the light of the withdrawal of the two planning applications which took place on the 27th of June, a week or so ago, which followed a number of, I think, productive discussions between Mr. Kelly and others on the council side and between and representatives of my clients. In view of that is that the council are not asking you, indeed perhaps more positively, are asking you not to have regard to that letter in your consideration of this objection, then we're not going to pursue it any further. We don't think that you need the additional material from us. We're happy to deal with the points that we want to make today orally to you, and the matter, as far as we're concerned, can be left to rest there, and we're very grateful to the council administrators for the position that they've taken. Thank you.
So that very fairly summarises the discussion I had with Mr. King this morning on the council's position. The letter of the 23rd of November was written specifically in the context of a series of planning applications that have now been withdrawn, as you're aware. We don't feel procedurally it is appropriate to withdraw that letter. It is in the public domain. However, as Mr. King indicated, given the context in which that letter was written and subsequent events, the council will not rely on the substance of that letter to resist the initial site that was being implemented. If that represents a satisfactory way for you to proceed, then that will not be able to use to make a ruling on the application for either the exclusion of that letter or the admissibility of the case.
Yeah, I think our view is that the development management process is entirely separate from what we're doing here, and whilst there may be some relevance between the two, in respect of specific applications, it's not something that we would want to get involved in the details of. So, yes, I think we're very happy with the conclusions that you've come to.
It seems sensible, yeah, at least. I'm most grateful, and Mr. Edwards kindly said that the council will be writing a letter to that effect.
Yes,
to confirm their position.
Yeah, I mean, if it would help just for the record, you could write a short email to the relevant to this.
we would welcome that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, can we therefore move to the agenda? The main issue is the plan and sound without the allocation of this site for development as proposed in the relevant representations, and if so, why? Could I also focus on the inspector's notes, which I think sets the parameters for our discussion this morning?
Yes.
And I have to say we will police that.
I hope so.
So do you wish to kick off?
Yes, may I? Can I just say what I'm intending to do, and this is obviously subject to your agreement and permission. I have prepared a short 2.5-page written opening, 3-page opening, which I'd like to deliver if you're agreeable to that. Then I was going to ask the gentleman sitting on my right to introduce, as it were, and flesh out a little bit the matters with which they are concerned. And then obviously it's over to the council and to the discussion. And we'll try and obviously keep that moving along pretty quickly. Does that sound as if it might work?
You're happy with this?
So I'm most grateful. Let me have distributed then my short opening. Thank you very much.
If you can have a couple of minutes to read this,
Do you want?
You're going to read it.
I was going to read it with your agreement. It should only take about 6-7 minutes.
Is there a copy of this that can be left on the programme officer's table, please?
We can leave one of ours.
Thank you. We can get some more copies made up. Great for that. The objector asked the objection site. I've referred to some plans which Mr. Adams will deal with shortly. Is allocated in the local plans either for housing and sports facilities or housing only. 15 hectares of land are proposed for allocation for housing with a capacity of up to about 600 dwellings, including 40% affordable. The land would be removed from the green belt on the basis that exceptional circumstances exist to justify the release. 20 hectares of land are proposed for allocation for outdoor sport and recreation, since such activities are encouraged in the green belt with new buildings for sport and recreation capable of being appropriate in it, references obviously to the framework. This land would remain in the green belt. The allocations we submit are necessary to make the plans sound because the plans do not currently adequately address the need for housing and for new facilities for sport and recreation. The allocations would furthermore enable development to take place in a sustainable location and without, we say, significant harm to the green belt. A number of matters that are relevant to this omission sites hearing have already been covered at other examination sessions and in representations already made by the objector, and you'll have seen that Appendix 2 to the objector's hearing statement identifies comprehensively those other matters and the documents that the objector has submitted that relate to these. These include in particular need for more housing land, greenbelt issues, sustainability and provision for meeting sporting and recreational needs. In July 2016, the objector, in the form of Trumpington Meadows Land Company, submitted the 2 planning applications, to which I've already referred, one for the development of the objection site for housing and sporting and recreational purposes, and the other for the redevelopment and improvement of Abbey Stadium, the home of Cambridge United Football Club. The 2 applications were linked in that the housing at the objection site was promoted on the basis that it constituted enabling development of the Abbey Stadium proposals, and therefore that very special circumstances existed to justify inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. Following discussions between representatives of the councils and the objector, both applications have been withdrawn. The illustrative master plan for the proposed housing and sporting recreational development is in our hearing statement. It remains relevant in that it shows in broad terms, but not in detail, Mr. Adams will speak to that in a moment, how the proposed allocation might be built out. The objection site is in single ownership and there are no physical or legal constraints on the delivery of housing or sporting and recreational facilities within 5 years following the adoption of the plans. In terms of the site's suitability for the proposed allocation, first, the design principles already successfully employed in the creation of a new urban edge at Trumpington will be adopted if further housing were to be developed on the objection site. Second, the new sporting and recreational facilities would be located between the edge of the housing and the M11 thereby retaining an open area of greenbelt between the built-up area and the motorway. Third, none of the relevant purposes of including the objection site in the greenbelt would be materially harmed if the allocation were made and the housing land removed from the greenbelt. As previously submitted material demonstrates, the Council's assessment of the significance of this area to the Cambridge Greenbelt and of the impact that development on the objection site would have on the Greenbelt, we consider is seriously flawed. Fourth, the objection site is in a highly sustainable location with public transport connections to the city centre and railway station nearby, and good access to other non-car modes, especially cycling, with the opportunity to improve these. Its development would not be reliant on taking up spare capacity on the road network. The allocation of the objection site is therefore required in order to make the plan sound, because without such an allocation, identified housing and recreational sporting needs wouldn't be met. It would be possible, alternatively, this is option 3, to allocate only the proposed this is option 2, I'm sorry, to allocate only the proposed housing land if you concluded that sporting recreational needs were in fact being adequately met by the plans. A third alternative, if you were satisfied that the site was suitable to meet future housing needs, but that its allocation in the current plans was not necessary, would be we propose to safeguard it for future residential development pending the preparation of the joint local plan, or in order to enable the councils to show a 5-year supply of housing land. And you have the objectors' proposed policy wording for each of the 3 options in Appendix 4 to the hearing statement. Thank you. That concludes my opening. So I'll now invite Mr. Adams to say what he wants to say. And I think, Mr. Adams, you're going to do this with reference to the hearing statement that your firm submitted along with its appendices.
Yes, thank you, Mr. King. I'll refer to the statement, and I'll also refer to the Council's statement on M11, and in particular pages 12 and 15.
Right, we'll come to that in a bit, won't we?
I'd like to start just by introducing the appendices to our statement, which we'll be referring to, and starting with Appendix 1, which is the site context plan. I have got a spare copy of that if anybody requires. So the site context plan identifies the emission site, which is to the south of the Trumpington Meadows development area, which is about 2/3 complete in terms of construction and occupation. So the key elements, really working from the south of the M11 and Junction 11, are delineated in light brown is the emission site, and the broken yellow-brown line identifies the boundary between the land that is proposed to be released from the greenbelt and allocated for housing, and the land which would be retained in greenbelt and would be used for open spaces or sports purposes. So the site is a natural extension of Trumpington Meadows, and that is there to be seen in terms of the substantial area of housing which has already been completed and occupied, primary school which is operational, and of course the Trumpington Park and Ride and Waitrose store, all within walking distance of the proposed allocation site.
My site's red, I don't know about anybody else.
brown.
So maybe a little bit
So
of
red or brown.
relaxing on the people who wear what it is.
The area of dark green is the country park, which has already been laid out as part of the Trumpington Meadows Planning Commission. Other things to draw attention to, which we will refer to in relation to the Greenbelt matters and transport matters. From this document, you can see clearly the relationship of the Trumpington Meadows and the omission site to Grantchester. We would not be narrowing the gap between Trumpington Meadows and Grantchester, and Mr. Burton will talk in more detail about that. And you can also see the relationship of the omission site to the historic core and city centre, and we say we have no impact on the relationship of Trumpington to the historic core or the green belt and how it forms a corridor leading right into the heart of the city. And then the only other matter I wanted to draw attention on this context plan is the relationship of the omission site to the major housing and employment growth areas in the Cambridge Southern Fringe. And we'll talk more about the significance of the proximity and strong connections between the omission site and the Adam Brooks Hospital and biomedical area and housing development that has already been delivered in the Southern Fringe.
And this area of photograph is a bit old now, and there's a huge amount happened, hasn't it?
Yes, so since this area was taken, more of Trumpington Meadows has been completed, but a significantly greater area of housing development and the biomedical park, including the construction of the new Papworth Hospital campus and the construction of the AstraZeneca European Research Headquarters campus is also now well advanced. So I'll ask Mr. Axon to talk about the significance of the proper relationship of the emission site to that growth area from a sustainable transport point of view. Just moving on, Appendix 2, as Mr. King referred to in his opening, is a detailed summary of all of the representations that our clients have submitted at the various stages of the local plans, including the joint hearings, covering the spatial vision, housing need, green belt transport, housing trajectory and green belt review methodology, and sports provision. I'm not going to address those matters at all, because I think
a matter of record.
It's a matter of record. Yeah. Then moving on into Appendix 3. Appendix 3 is the plan which was submitted with our clients' objections, showing the area of land which it is proposed, which we request is allocated for housing, which is the area bounded in blue and hatched blue. And that area is 15 hectares.
And that includes the sort of horizontally hatched bit, which is in City Council's area, doesn't it? You're talking about the whole of that top area.
On the east corner of the site, you can see the boundary between the City Council and the District Council. So the site of the proposed allocation is in blue. The area which would be continue to be in the green belt and which would be used for either sport or open space, or indeed remain as agriculture, is cross-hatched and bounded by the green. and is all in the ownership of our client.
We'll just pick up on the key.
Yes, in terms of the key just identifies the proposed uses within the allocation. If what this plan was submitted with the representation some time ago, so just to bring a couple of things up to date. The description of the allocation, land to be removed from Greenbelt in Cambridge City and allocated for a mixed-use development as part of an extension to Trumpington Meadows, comprising residential use, indoor sport and ancillary supporting uses. When this submission was made, we were promoting indoor sport in that area as part of the sporting village. We're no longer proposing a specific indoor sports hall on that land, as that was largely required by Cambridge United Football Club. So, as I'll come to when I take you through the policy options, we're not seeking an allocation that includes indoor sport.
So really those keys should be land to be, I mean, this isn't critical because we've got the policy wording, but land to be removed from Greenbelt in Cambridge City or South Cambs and allocated for residential development is really it, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I'd like to move on to Appendix 4 in the proposed policy wording.
Can we do 5 first?
Yes.
Is that, I'd just like to stick with plans and then go back to 4 if that's all right.
Yeah. So, Appendix 5 is the illustrative master plan
Carry on.
Restricted for space.
I know, I can see that. Yeah, Appendix 5. go on.
So Appendix 5 is the illustrative master plan for that accompanied the application to Planning Commission for the sporting village that is now being withdrawn. But it does show the broad principles of the sort of development that might come forward under our policy option 1, which is for housing and sports uses. I think the principles are really quite clear. The housing is a natural extension of the approved Trumpington Meadows housing area, with strong connections through to the park and ride and local shopping facilities beyond. And you can see the opportunity to provide clear connections through to both the park and ride, the primary school and the local shopping facilities, all within walking distance or a very short cycle journey. You can see in the middle of the housing area the larger building, which was the indoor sports building that was required by Cambridge United Football Club. And that is the building that was very specific to the application for planning permission. And in the allocation, we are seeking an allocation for residential across the whole of the omission site area. So that particular element was very specific to the Cambridge Sporting Village planning application. And then to the south, we have the land that would remain within the green belt, and here it is laid out for a number of 3G football, rugby and hockey pitches, which are the you can see clearly the sports pitches to the south of the housing area, between the motorway and the proposed housing area. And then in the eastern half, the northwestern sector is laid out for off-road cycle circuits and related facilities, and also informal open space related to the residential. So that is an illustration of one potential option for the site. And I'll come back to describing the policy options.
Now, are you done with 5? Let's get back to 4 then.
Okay. So just to go back to in the appendix to the policy options. So policy option 1 is for housing on the land to be excluded from the green belt, for sport and recreation on the land that remains in the green belt. And just to clarify, in our proposed policy here, which I think is probably it's quite simple. First part of the policy, residential development and the provision of new sports and recreation facilities, as shown on the plan in Appendix 3. And we identify a number of criteria which would be applied to the design and operation of the residential area, which I'll briefly run through. The creation of a new high-quality urban and natural edge to the development. So the existing Trumpington Meadows Planning Commission incorporates a high-quality natural edge to the development, and the proposal is that we would reinstate that edge, albeit on a different alignment, moving the edge to the south west. The development of a high design quality and character with the development of Trumpington Meadows. Mr. Burton will refer to the design quality that has been achieved at Trumpington Meadows, and we see the site as being a natural extension of that quality of design in terms of landscape, public realm, and townscape. And the Trumpington Meadows scheme has achieved a number of commendations for its design. The criteria to ensure that any impacts on biodiversity and ecology can be avoided or appropriately mitigated. The work that has been undertaken to date in relation to the application has not identified any issues relating to ecology on the emission site, and the proposed landscaping within the green belt and indeed within the development area will provide an opportunity to enhance biodiversity and ecology. Providing good quality pedestrian and cycle connections to Trumpington Meadows and Trumpington Park and Ride. This is a real strength of the emission site, the ability to seamlessly connect it to a park and ride and development area that is already highly sustainable, and Mr. Axon will talk about that. Sustainable drainage measures, according to any archaeological matters. Again, studies to date have not identified any issues that cannot be mitigated relating to drainage or archaeology. The provision of appropriate package of transport measures, which Mr. Axon will talk to, and contributions being provided towards community facilities, services and education, which I will pick up in relation to the comments made in the council statement. So all of those criteria relate to the proposed housing area, and then the final paragraph relates to the remaining land which would be within the green belt identified for sports and recreation. And there's reference there to the creation of grass pitches and ancillary structures and buildings, for example floodlights and changing facilities, and that is the type of facility linked to sport in the green belt, which we believe is envisaged in policy NH10, which we discussed in an earlier session of the hearing in January of this year. So we haven't made a specific cross-reference to that policy. We don't believe that's necessary. But policy NH10 allows for ancillary buildings linked to linked to sports facilities in the green belt. And clearly, if proposals were brought forward which were more than ancillary, they would fall outside policy NH10. And that's what we have in mind in that policy.
Policy NH10 really just reflects, I think it's been agreed between you and the council, the working policy. It reflects the policy in the framework. Appropriate facilities for outdoor recreation will be permitted where they will not harm the openness of the green belt and the purposes of including land within it. So that would apply to these facilities. Okay. Option 2.
So option 2, in this option, the land that remains as green belt would remain unallocated. So if it was concluded that there is not an unmet need for sports facilities that should be accommodated at Trumpington, then policy option 2, which we're inviting you to consider, would be for housing with the land remaining as green belt unallocated. However, some of the land would be required for open space relating to the housing and to help form the natural edge of the development area. And the criteria guiding the housing design remain the same as in option 1.
There's a correction, isn't there, in option 2?
Yes, in option 2, in the second line of the policy, it should read, will be permitted, and currently it says residential development land Trumpington will be supported. So supported should be replaced with the word permitted.
Thank you. Option 3.
And then finally, policy option 3. So in the event that it was concluded that further housing land was not required in these local plans, but on the basis that the site is, in our submission, a logical location for future housing in the southern growth area of the city and a highly sustainable location, the land would be released from the green belt and safeguarded so it could be brought forward when need has been identified, which could in future reviews of the local plan. And the reference there to that mechanism is paragraph 85, bullet point 3 of the framework. Which says that when defining boundaries, local planning authorities should, and there's a total of 6 criteria. The third criteria is when necessary, identifying their plans areas of safeguarded land between the urban area and the green belt in order to meet longer term development needs stretching well beyond the planned period. So we think that is that is our third option.
There's a couple of other very small points to note, perhaps on Appendix 4. Just to note that the last, under option 3, the last criterion, contributions being provided, hasn't got a bullet point next to it, which it should have, because all the criteria are the same under each policy option as they relate to the housing land, aren't they? That's a very small point. I think there's nothing else on
Nothing else on the appendices.
Okay. Just to go back to the the hearing statement, just to note what's in it. I'm certainly not going to ask it to refabricate the script, obviously. Section 2 refers to the planning application. Section 3 deals with the options for site allocation, which you've just really told us about. What would the allocation achieve? Meet housing needs, meet sporting needs. Matters already addressed at the examination, as I understand it. Impacts of allocation, green belt, openness and purposes. Well, I'm going to ask Mr. Burton to say a little bit about those in a moment. So, if you want to say something, do, but otherwise we'll leave it to him.
I don't want to duplicate what Mr.
All right.
Burton.
Then there's a section headed feasibility delivery, and again, to some extent, these are matters that I'm going to ask Mr. Axon to do in just a moment. So unless there's anything you want to draw attention to in the text there, I'm going to invite
Just
you to...
briefly,
Yes, please.
just on feasibility and delivery, just very briefly, the site is in one ownership. There are no obstacles in our view to its delivery. I'll come on to points that have been raised by the council statement. And it could be delivered, it could make a significant delivery of, we estimate, around 600 houses with around 250 affordable homes within a 5-year period. So this is potentially, this site could make a rapid contribution to meeting housing needs generally and affordable housing needs in particular, in a location which already has the majority of infrastructure required to support the sustainable development of housing on the site, and in a location where there is the most rapid growth of employment within the city region. That growth, the actual growth in employment over the next 2 to 3 years, as the biomedical campus and hospital is completed, will be extremely rapid. Several thousand people are moving to the biomedical campus. So we think the ability of the omission site to be delivered, to be in place to meet that need alongside the other housing developments which are being completed, such as Carpen Meadows, is a material consideration which will weigh in favour of the allocation of the site. In this section, we have a more detailed plan of the Cambridge Southern Fringe, which might be useful when Mr. Axon talks about the significance of the sustainable transport connections of the omission site, and in particular the point that we've made in paragraph 5.8, which relating to recent survey evidence that a very high proportion of the Trumpington Meadows residents that have already moved in use cycling as their primary means of movement to work. And Mr. Axon will expand on that, as we think that just confirms that this is a logical place to put more housing if it is concluded that more housing needs to be found now, or to plan for future delivery of housing, which would seem to be an inevitable need at some point in